Today, we're diving deep into a really radical new design for brain-computer interfaces. It's called Neuro-Photonic Agency, or NPA for short. And look, this isn't another one of those stories about AI replacing us. Far from it. This is about giving the human mind, which the source material calls the only source of genuine intelligence, a massive speed-of-light upgrade.
The researchers behind this, well, they don't mince words. They basically label even the most sophisticated AI a philosophical zombie. It's a fascinating idea, right? A P-zombie is something that can perfectly mimic talking, reasoning, behaving like it's intelligent, but on the inside, there's no actual intent. It's a perfect copy with no mind. And that is the core problem NPA is being designed to solve.
And this really just illustrates the gap we're talking about. Current brain-computer interfaces, yeah, they're impressive, but they're basically framed here as just a faster typewriter. They give you quicker access to the digital world, sure, but they don't fundamentally expand your ability to think. NPI's goal? It's something else entirely. It's aiming to be a foundational upgrade to the mind itself.
So this brings us to what the research calls the agency paradox. Why is it so ridiculously hard to bridge the gap between our messy, creative, biological minds and the clean, logical world of computers? Well, as we're about to see, the problem is baked into the very way we currently process information.
The source material uses this fantastic analogy. Think about it. Our thoughts aren't neat and tidy. They're rich, they're layered, they're continuous, but when our current tech tries to measure that, it has to chop it all up into a stream of ones and zeros. It's literally like trying to squeeze a high-definition movie through a tiny little straw. You just lose all the nuance, all the richness, you lose the very essence of the thought itself.
And this is where the whole philosophy behind NPA comes from. It's a huge shift called agency augmentation. The idea is, instead of trying to build an artificial mind from scratch, let's just give the genuine, irreplaceable human mind a tool to expand its own processing power on a scale that's, frankly, hard to even wrap your head around.
Okay, so how does this thing actually work? Well, it all starts with the first of three massive breakthroughs. Before you can even think about connecting a speed-of-light processor to a brain, you have to solve a huge signal-to-noise problem. The solution is something they call the chemical gate.
I mean, think about it. Your brain is firing constantly, nonstop. Most of that is just background noise, right? It's just chaos. If you plugged every single one of those electrical spikes into a processor, you just get useless garbage. So the question is, how do you build a filter that only opens for genuine, high-level intent?
And the solution is this chemoperovskite gate. You can think of it as a biological lock and key. It's this multi-layered system that's designed to completely ignore all that electrical noise and only react to a very, very specific chemical signature that proves a thought was truly deliberate.
Okay, so here's how that password actually works. When you form an intentional thought, your neurons release a flood of a neurotransmitter called glutamates. Right on the device's surface, there's an enzyme that immediately grabs that glutamate and converts it into hydrogen peroxide. Then, that peroxide chemically changes the bottom layer of the device, flipping it from a high-resistance off state to a low-resistance on state. The system only wakes up when that exact chemical key is present.
So, once that gate opens and says, yep, this is a real thought, we hit the next massive challenge. Traditional silicon chips are just way too slow. And this brings us to the second breakthrough, the optical accelerator.
This is a critical question, right? To truly augment the mind, you need a processor that doesn't just keep up with thought, it has to be basically instantaneous. So how do you do that when every silicon chip in the world is limited by clock cycles and electrical resistance?
The answer is, you get rid of the traditional computer entirely. This is a diffractive optical neural network. And what's just incredible here is that the computer isn't a set of circuits. It's a solid, transparent crystal. The logic, the weights of the neural network, are physically 3D printed right into the structure of the crystal itself. The source calls it a crystalline library of weights.
And the speed? It's just staggering. A calculation takes about 10 femtoseconds. Let me try to put that into perspective for you. That is 10 quadrillionths of a second. The delay is literally just the time it takes for light to travel across a 2-millimeter crystal. That's it. And this quote from the source material just nails it. It really puts that speed into perspective. It's a completely different timescale of interaction. By the time a traditional processor has even started its first thought, the NPA's calculation is already finished.
And if the speed wasn't mind-bending enough, check out the efficiency. The amount of energy the computation itself uses? Zero. Absolutely nothing. All the energy was spent one time, up front, to make the crystal.
The actual calculation is just the passive physics of light passing through that pre-programmed structure.
All right, so we've filtered for intent. We've computed an answer at the speed of light. Now what? How do you get that answer back to the user safely and, effectively? This brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the third breakthrough, synthetic intuition.
Here's the challenge. You've got this incredibly powerful, instantaneous answer. But if the brain gets it like an external piece of data, like a notification or a voice in your head, it loses its power. So how do you make the answer feel like it came from you? Well, this is how they do it. The answer comes out of the crystal as a focused beam of light, which then hits a detector that creates a tiny electrical current. But, and this is the key part, that current never actually touches the neuron. Instead, it creates an electrical field that nudges the neuron into firing. It's called aphaptic coupling. Think of it as a completely contactless, non-toxic way to talk back to the brain.
And because that signal is delivered so directly and so cleanly, bypassing your normal senses, your brain doesn't even register it as outside information. It processes it as an endogenous insight. It feels like a sudden aha moment, a gut feeling, or a memory you just instantly remembered. The line between your thought and the computer's output, it just vanishes.
So when you put all three of these breakthroughs together, the chemical gate, the optical accelerator, and this synthetic intuition, you get something entirely new. You get a true biological synthetic hybrid, an augmented human. Even the physical integration is just as innovative. The device isn't just placed next to brain tissue, it's actually built as a porous, kind of honeycomb-like scaffold. And this structure actually encourages your own neurons to physically grow into and through the device. The computer literally becomes a lattice that your brain inhabits.
So let's just do a super quick recap of the three pillars that make NPA possible. First, you've got the chemical gate, which uses biochemistry to weed out noise and find genuine intent. Second, the optical accelerator, a passive crystal that computes at the speed of light with zero energy. And finally, the photonic feedback loop, which safely delivers the answer so it feels like your own thought.
And this brings us right back to that core idea. The entire architecture just rejects the whole premise of creating artificial intelligence. The human mind is treated as the one and only, irreplaceable source of agency. And the goal of NPA is simply to give that agency a tool to expand its power instantaneously. And this leaves us with a final, really provocative question. If we can truly eliminate that information bottleneck and allow the human mind to process complexity at the speed of light, what new kinds of decisions, solutions, and even realities, things we currently can't even conceive of, what will this newly augmented human agent choose to create? It's a question that could define our future.